Okay, call this regular meeting of Grand Forks City Council to order. Two items I'd like to mention when we to get started here. I'd like to welcome Duncan Redfern to his first official Grand Forks regular council meeting, and also a time to thank Daniel for all of the work that he's done over the last couple of months. I think that we all know the kind of effort that he's put in, the kind of attention, the kind of long hours. So a thank you to Daniel for putting a lot of things together for us over the last few months. We have a number of guests in the waiting room. We'll get to them as we move down the agenda. So the first item of business is to adopt the agenda of April the 6th. Can I have that motion, please?
So, Mr. Mayor, if we could amend the agenda, though, please, to reverse item 4A and 4B.
All right, and the request to move those two items. So the adoption of the agenda as amended, can I have that accepted by the two movers? Councillor Moslin, that's okay with you?
Yes.
Councillor
Yes.
Thompson, second it. All those in favor? Okay.
Yes.
And I have lost the agenda.
Oh, sorry, sir.
Minutes.
Now, I have no agenda if I don't have it up on the screen. Okay, and so the minutes from the March 9th special meeting, can I have a motion to adopt those minutes? Councillor Corlick and Councillor Coughlin, all those in favor?
Yes.
And the registered petitions and delegations, we're moving on to the two items that we moved around. So we're going to hear first from Boundary Family Services. Welcome, Darren, and the proposal regarding outreach services from Boundary Family Services. And I'll move this to Mr. Pratt.
Good morning, Mayor and Council and staff from the city. As my letter outlines, the province has kind of reached back out to human service providers around addressing the needs of our most vulnerable population in response to COVID-19. As you're aware, the Safe Stay shelter is fully decommissioned now, and a lot of our clients have kind of dispersed back through community. One of the concerns that's being brought up is how to maintain appropriate social distancing and provide services so that those clients are not actually as prevalent in community and perhaps are able to kind of self-isolate a little more effectively if they have a safe and compliant place where they can be. So BC Housing reached out to us with kind of a proposal for us to provide 90 days of an outreach style provision of service, which would see us provide things like food, sanitary supplies such as alcohol, wipes, things like that. One of the concerns we have, though, is that one of the main camps is at Moto, which is actually on city property. So we did not want to proceed any further down this path until we had a discussion with City Council about their feelings about provision of these services and kind of how that may impact the Moto camp and some of the other camps along the riverbank.
Is that an opening for questions or comment there?
You bet it is, Your Worship.
Okay, so what I see here is that the outreach would actually begin to provide some services to people at Moto in terms of power and water and sanitary and food. Is that the plan?
So at this point, there's no power, but what we were hoping to provide was sanitary services, food services, and then also just the ability to kind of find ways to kind of keep those clients kind of able to follow through with their social isolation protocols. More than anything, we're trying to minimize the through traffic in the downtown and through community at large. We just know that in this day and age of social isolation, it's very difficult for that clientele when they have to come into town for methadone, when they have to come into town for groceries, when they're kind of consistently moving through the community. Social isolation is very, very difficult for them to do.
Agreed. Would you attempt to control the in and out traffic at Moto?
Again, these are preliminary discussions, Your Worship, and it's not just Modo. So we've identified 7 locations in the greater Grand Forks area. So it's not specifically Modo, it's these 7 locations as well. But Modo is the largest, most established location. So that's kind of the one that we've used as the model for this delivery.
Council, opening this for questions and clarification. I can't see your...
Councillor Zielinski, then Moslin, Krog, and Thompson in order.
All right. Councillor Zielinski was first.
Yes, I've got a few questions. I'll start out with this one is this 90-day funding from the province, Darren, what's that different from last year at this time? What new services? You mentioned food. It sounds like that's covered. So what's this new round of funding different than we had last year, I guess?
I can't speak to what you had last year because my agency wasn't involved in that. So I don't know what was involved last year.
Okay, my understanding there was nothing involved then. And so, yeah, I guess my question is the outcome about this, but I'll leave that at that for now.
Rosalind, next.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. To answer Mr. Pratt briefly, yes, this councillor would support a service like that. I guess I do have some questions, a couple questions. One, I certainly support both bringing services to that population as well as an increase in supervision, which is what I think is at the bottom of it. We would like to help minimize the clientele moving in and out of town. So I guess what my question is for Mr. Pratt, what plans would he have for the supervision besides providing sanitation and food services? How does he visualize supervising this clientele at that particular site? And would there be a better site within town that would be more likely to be successful in supervising the clientele? Thank you.
So, Councillor Moslin, for supervision, am I to assume that you mean keeping people, for lack of a better phrase, quarantined so that their access and egress is a little more restricted? Is that kind of your question?
Yes, that would be my question. Very, the Safe Stay Shelter had a very, clear policy about moving in and out, and people coming in and out, and different people coming in and out. Do you see that kind of? This is not going to be the same program, I guess.
No, Councillor Moslin, it's not, and just because of the logistics, that will be impossible to do. Yes. The Safe Stay Shelter was staffed 24/7. It was a finite location. Because we have multiple locations, we have no authority to tell people they can or cannot move from their own domicile. The Safe Stay Shelter was our location. We paid the rent, we monitored it. We had the ability under the Trespass Act to remove people. We have no such authority outside of that space.
Next question.
I'll pass the baton, so to speak.
Councillor Krog.
Councillor Krog.
Yes. Now, it was brought up all last year and everything. Liability back onto the city for the actions that happen at Modo, because it is an illegal squat on city property. So Valley Heights in the past has said, well, who's going to be liable if they do start a grass fire and it takes out their house, right? So I don't want anything to do with the city being liable. Will the provincial government add or pony up for the insurance to give the money to FISC so that they can then get proper insurance. I'm not in favor of the illegal squat camp. Making it sanctioned will make it grow. So unless there's a limit to what's there now, right? It's wrong location. The outreach program is good, but not setting up Moto as a town.
Thank you, Councillor Krog. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. My question through you to Darren is, what specifically, if council were to approve this, would be required? Is it porta potties, water, sanitary stations? I don't know. What would be included in this ask?
So, Councillor Thompson, we've asked the province when they came to us. We put together a full budget to cover that stuff. So we're not asking the city to cover sanitation stations or porta potties or any of that. When we were approached, we actually built that into the budget for this program. What we wanted is, we were very loath to move ahead without the city being partners in this and just understanding all of the consequences. Like Councillor Krog pointed out, there is that liability piece that does creep into this. So this, I think you all know me well enough to know that I'm pretty collaborative in how I do things. So this was that next logical step, was to come to council and your city team to talk about, if this was something that was palatable, how could we make this work the most efficiently?
Okay, and a follow-up of the clientele that you had at the shelter, how many have relocated to the Moto? And if they're not there, do you have any idea where they are located?
Off the top of my head, 6 of our long-term clients from the Safe Stay shelter went back to Moto. So that's actually where they left in January to come into the Safe Stay. And we have a pretty good idea where the rest of our displaced populace are. That's why I mentioned 7 different locations. We're in contact through the wellness working group with other providers like the Gospel Chapel, like Whispers, to kind of get a clear map of where everybody's located.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Zielinski.
Okay, we'll maybe tackle the different fires up Morrissey Creek, the inability for these people to actually cook any meal for themselves if fires are banned type thing, and back to Neil's liability on all this. George, can you add to that on the issues you've seen there and how you're going to control no burning up there if we legitimize it?
So let me lead this off. So I'll lead this off through your worship. Just to confirm, Darren's ask is essentially to place amenities on city property up at Moto. Is that correct, Darren? And so, yes. So a result of that is more people may gather in that area and may move into that area, and we could encourage people to go to that area if council wanted to. And Councillor Zielinski, your question is, how are we going to manage that fire risk in that area?
I guess my question is, we've got an issue right now by the looks of those fire calls, and we know that George is going to put a ban on burning for cooking. So I want to know, without any changes right now, what the challenges are with that group of people and the liabilities, especially with the fires, for what we have today, let alone adding to the problem down the road.
Yeah, so Jen, just to confirm through your worship, you want to know the challenges we're having today and whether this is going to help or create more challenges. There you go. Okay.
Councillor Corley.
Go ahead, George.
Through the mayor, yes. So, Councillor Zielinski, so imposing a fire ban for the purpose of cooking, it will create more challenges. However, I'm not sure the amenities that Mr. Pratt would be providing to the residents up there. So would this come in the form of campfire or cooking stoves with propane, other things like that, so we can eliminate the need for campfires?
So if I may address that, that was part of our ask, was for propane appliances to basically mitigate the fact that there would be any open burning. So that was built into our ask to BC Housing.
And through your worship, Darren, you would also be providing some monitoring or some presence in that area as far as that educational piece?
Yeah, so our theory behind this was to actually have 4 distinct outreach workers, so 2 teams of 2 that would be alternating through the community, making sure that everybody was kind of having their needs met. But I hate the word compliance, but there is a hope that there is compliance with this to minimize risk to community and to neighbors.
And so, Councillor Zielinski, to answer your question, if there was compliance and if there were propane stoves or gas stoves, we would hope that would decrease the amount of fire calls we're receiving right now because it's currently unmonitored and there are fires.
Correct.
Okay. And Councillor Corley.
Oh.
You got to mic yourself. Councillor Corley, yeah.
Yeah, got it. I think. So some of my questions were answered regarding cooking. My concern is, of course, liability, the increase in population, and how, say after 90 days, how will this be brought to an end? Because it's not going to be that easy to do, I believe. So how is that going to work?
I think that, everybody said it'd be difficult to wind down the safe stay shelter. We did that on our timeline. We were done on the 31st. You're right, ongoing, this doesn't fix the problem at all. This is purely a COVID-19 response as put forward by the province. This doesn't address any of the historical issues that have been going on for 10 years, I would say, at least. Maybe this begins dialogue for a long-term plan, but this is strictly in response to the provincial health officer's mandate that there be service for our most vulnerable populace. This is not a long-term solution.
Okay, so one other question. So we got a group in Modo. What about the 6 or 7 other camps? How will that be looked after? Because they're everywhere.
And again, so when you have 2 teams of 2, the expectation is that they're rotating through those areas. And that's outreach. That means going to them where they are.
Okay.
I have a question about the growth in population. I understand in looking at what's happening in other communities that we have a spike in family violence and discord and pressure. Are you expecting that we will get COVID-19 displaced people occurring in our community over the next month?
I can't even begin to guess at that, Your Worship.
That it may be a reality that we have a new population of people that are economic refugees or are looking for a place to get away from a bad home environment. That was a statement, I guess, not a question. Further on this matter?
Yes, I just have a comment, if I may, that to have as many located in one area during this time for 90 days, I don't have a particular issue with. I'm hearing from Darren is that they will be monitored. There will be some services provided to them through their budget. We have no control over those who aren't or in other areas, except through governance and if they're in the city or by law. And if they're outside of the city, that's a regional district issue. And I think what we need to do as a council is to provide Father Family Services with the support they're requesting to allow them to operate as they are asking. But I would ask our management team, and in particular the fire chief, for his comments on that, and then also to Duncan for his thoughts.
Okay, let's go to Duncan. We have a list of people with their hands up here, but acquiesce to Duncan.
Sure. So through your worship, I guess the biggest piece is there are unsheltered or unhoused individuals in our community, and there, I believe, will continue to be individuals within our community. And so really you're talking about either that location, maybe council has a different idea of a location, or the current model where the individuals are everywhere within the community. And so really you're talking about, is the risk greater centralizing some of this activity, or is the risk greater having it spread out throughout the community parks and throughout different areas? And in particular, we're talking about fire. And so this is where I'll go to George and lead him off down that path, I guess.
Sure. Thank you, Duncan. Through the mayor, so kind of looking at this through the lens logistics. So I wasn't aware that we had, until Mr. Pratt mentioned that we had 7 different locations. I was aware of maybe 3 to 4. Again, with the Moto area being the biggest area of population or density there. So in terms of managing this, ideally from a fire side, it's going to be easier to manage and have our crews respond to one known location. However, that if you look at the other side of the coin there, say we have grass fires, whatnot, a wildland fire, we have the Valley Heights subdivision in that close proximity. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Is it ideal to have these folks together? For us, I believe so, but again, we have that close interface area as well.
Okay, we have Councillor Zielinski with his hand up.
Thank you. So if I've got this right, Darren, if City Council says no to Moto, nothing's going to change other than there's not going to be any services as far as porta potties or whatnot. You'll still look after the clientels in that spot and 7 other places, and that's why you're here today, is just ask for permission to try and legitimize that and add extra services to the one site. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I think you do, Councillor Zielinski, but also just to realize, as you pointed out, it's not just Moto, but Moto's kind of the center of that hub, if you will.
Yeah, and that's goes to my point is, if we're going to legitimize a place for, I'll say squatters for the lack of a better term, I'd like to see everybody there. If that's what we're going to do, then it's one site, not 7 sites. And the reality is that's not going to happen, because those other 6 sites, they're on their separate, they're on their own for a reason. So yeah, I'm having a problem legitimizing one site, yet not cleaning up the riverbanks and getting everybody that needs those services in one spot. But that's just my point of view.
Thank you. Councillor Krug, waiting patient.
Okay, to go back earlier to your comment about the family violence, that type of thing, and people escaping that, there are resources already available for those, like the shelters and stuff like that. I don't know, when this first came up, there was hints that, oh, because of COVID. And I'm like, well, if it's because of COVID, now you're trying to lump them all together. Is that really a good idea? Like, I could support having a single site, not at Moto, but we would lease it to whoever wants to be in charge of it, taking away our liability, right? So Moto isn't the appropriate place, but if there was an appropriate place, then we shouldn't be the landlords.
Thank you. Councillor Moslin?
Yes, Your Worship. It is difficult here, but I do want to, again, support the request. I believe that the people who work with these people who are our current outreach workers, and in many ways are current bylaw enforcement and security officers, would like to see this situation centralized so that these people can be better serviced and supervised. I do wonder about that particular site, simply because I do not. It does have difficulty with supervision. It does not have any existing services. Nonetheless, the province has given us the order to look after this population. And this seems to be a plan that's been put together by an agency that we trust to provide a professional service. I believe that it would be incumbent both. It would be an improvement both for those clients and for the rest of the city if we start to service and supervise this population somewhere. Yes, there is the threat that there will be growth at the end of 90 days. We're still going to have this population anyways, whether they're now at Modo or not. They're not going to go anywhere. We know that there's going to be some sort of seasonal increase in this population. It's only going to make the need for services and supervision more important. So I would hope that council can see their way to cooperating with Mr. Commitee and Boundary Family Support Services in approving this request. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Just a couple of things through you to Darren. Of the 7 sites, how many are located in the city? And the second part of my question is, building on what Councillor Krog said, if we were to enter into a lease, would the provincial government fund insurance?
So, Councillor Thompson, of the 7 sites, 5 are in city, and I can't speak to what the province would be willing to fund around insurance or not. Our ask was pretty basic around just amenities. I can definitely go back and ask about that potential for insurance or a lease or what that would look like at council's behest.
Thank you. Unless there's other people that have requests or questions, I would like to put forward a motion that council supports the request of Boundary Family Services to, in accordance with their request.
There are other people waiting to speak.
Okay, then I'll map off on that.
Suggested by Duncan that we hold off on this until we get to 6B, where we would have an opportunity to make the decision on this matter. And so, Councillor Krog.
Yes, couple of things. Councillor Moslin has mentioned it numerous times. Supervision. This does not include supervision. The outreach workers would come, check things out, and leave. So there is no camp supervision. And a government order to take care of the most vulnerable. I don't remember seeing one that said that the municipality has to do this. So that was one thing. And I'm just thinking that if it's, like I say, we'll talk about it on 6 or whatever, but I would like to see a staff report that shows exactly, for one, what our liabilities are. So legal opinions, before we agree. Like, I support the outreach program. I would vote on that right now, and that they can get their funding. Legitimizing Moto or any of the other camps, I will not agree with. And as for the, yeah, you'll get an increase with summer traffic, but if you actually have sanctioned areas, you'll get a lot more increase. They'll run through the season until the winter, and then boom, there comes your winter shelter type thing. So yeah, that's basically my comments.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Moslin and then Councillor Zielinski.
Sorry, Your Worship, I shall lower my hand. I just do want to point out, though, one of the three declarations of the Emergency Act the province did put on, did charge the municipality to do what they could for food banks and for the vulnerable. Anyhow, I'll pass the baton.
Councillor Zielinski.
Yeah, I think Councillor Krog made a good point there as far as Moto is not a new situation. And we should allow staff to give us a report on all the issues around there. Yeah, I think that's a very good idea.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson.
Well, just a couple of things. I think time is of the essence here. And I don't know how rapidly our staff can put a report together in that regard. But would it be possible to put a limit on the number of sites allowed at the Moto?
Okay, and I think what I'm hearing here is that we're asking for a staff report. And we've outlined a number of questions that we have. Back to Mr. Pratt, are there things that you would clarify with council at this point going forward on this matter?
I think I've answered all the questions, and I don't have any for council at this point. Yeah, unless anybody has anything else to add.
I see Councillor Krog has his hand up.
Yeah, it was in response to Councillor Thompson's statement. So yes, yes, it would take a while for staff to come up with it. There's already some background info, I'm sure, because this is not a new situation. I was thinking once spring hit, we were actually going to completely remove Moto and clean it up. That's what I was hoping for. And time is of the essence. No, this is not another 11th hour, you know, oh, we need to do this tomorrow because of why, right? It doesn't make sense. Like I say, if we want to support the outreach program, 100% behind that, and they can do whatever they want in any of the sites except for legitimizing them, and that may mean also the bringing in of equipment and stuff, because then you're making it look like it's legitimate.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Zielinski.
Thank you. The big question is 90 days or not, funding or not. What's going to happen with this population after 90 days?
I'm not sure who that's back to, but I'm assuming to Boundary Family.
So I guess the question I'll bounce back to Councillor Zielinski is, show me a community that solved the problem in the province.
Yeah, and I guess that's my point is provincial request to look after this vulnerable population, just as our seniors also, and everybody else basically. Population is there today. Even if we did something crazy today, they'd still be there tomorrow. So I'm wondering, you know, it's been mentioned the long-term, not effects, but the long-term expectations of this population after the 90 days. You know, we can keep throwing little bits out there, but you're right, it hasn't been fixed, it hasn't been answered, and just throwing a haphazard thing at it without a staff report. Yeah, my question is, after 90 days, what's going to happen? Because I don't see any difference from today to 90 days from now.
Councillor Krog, we're moving to closure here. You have another question?
Yeah, just at the end of 90 days, are we just going to be seeing extension? Well, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen with the virus. We don't know a lot of things, so we haven't got a clue what's going to happen in 90 days. But I can say probably 100% for sure, in 90 days, as Mr. Pratt said, the problem won't be solved, and they'll just be more ingrained, and maybe even a larger camp. You look at any of the other camps anywhere on the Lower Mainland, and they grow, right? So now we're going to probably end up with a growing camp, and then what? You're, you know, saying either you give them the land, or you say this is city land and you've had your time here, it's now time to leave.
Councillor, thank you. And moving towards closure, Councillor Thompson.
Just through you to Councillor Krog, if I may. Do you have an alternative suggestion? I would, from my perspective, like to see people that are vulnerable in one particular area where, you know, they are distancing themselves, and I think that would happen at the Moto. You know, we need to do something. We have been charged by the province that we have to deal with this matter, and you know, if there's another solution, I would be more than happy to hear it.
Councillor Krog being asked by Councillor Thompson, responding.
Yeah, go back to what Mr. Moslin said about the Emergency Act, and they said what we can do. They did not say you have to do it, because if they did say that, then they would be sending a big check along with it. And as for anything to do with isolating and social distancing, sorry, Psycho Dog, any of that stuff is not going to happen. This is the exact opposite. You're encouraging this one group to hang out as a group, and they're not going to social distance. And then the other people that don't even live there, that go up there to deliver supplies, and I'm not talking groceries, are going to be constantly coming and going, and it's foolish to think that the people are going to stay in the camp and not wander the community. So it has nothing to do with COVID, right?
But
oh, and another, sorry, in response to your question, what are the other answers? The answer is you don't have to do anything.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Krog, and we're, I think, reaching a point here where we've pretty much exhausted the questions. Councillor Thompson, did you have something to end with here?
No, I think I'll just let it go, and we can discuss this at another time. I guess once we get a staff report.
Okay.
So I'm asking for a staff report.
I hear that from yourself and other councillors nodding their heads.
So through your worship.
Thank you.
Yeah. So through your worship, if I may, under. Sorry, I have to go back to my agenda. Under 6B number 2, I can provide some additional information and probably answer a lot of the questions and provide council some alternatives moving forward when we get to that item, if you like.
All right, and so moving on, I want to thank Darren Pratt for appearing in front of council here, and thank you very much, Mr. Pratt, for the information you're giving us.
Thank you, Your Worship, and to the council and city staff, thank you for your time as well.
All right, moving on the agenda. Can you give me the agenda back?
Do we need a motion though, or no, we'll wait, never mind.
We're waiting on 6B. Okay, we're going back to the flood prevention plan for downtown properties from CREM Holdings. That's the item on the agenda. Council, you've looked at this proposal from CREM, and I'm wondering, do we need a staff comments here from Duncan, or are we opening for questions, comments?
Through your worship, if I could provide some context?
That
Okay, so through your worship, we have Dolores here, who's been our main point of contact with the individual. And again, purely a council decision, and the context is this dam would be placed on city property. It would be taking away from intended use of sidewalks and parking lot and some other areas within the city. Having heard that there is an emergency response plan, if council wants to move forward with this, we would strongly recommend that we'll enter into like a license to occupy or some kind of agreement to ensure there's no liability to the city, but also timing. We wouldn't want this dam potentially placed today. It's our understanding they can be erected fairly quickly, and you'd want to ensure that there was actually a potential flood event that would impact that building before that dam went up. And those are just some considerations that staff would put in front of council if you would like to move forward with this. It could make people feel like there isn't a broader plan in place, which George and Graham talked about this morning. There is, and it could result in other unintended consequences, moving the water other places. So I pass it over to Dolores just to ask if there's anything I've missed.
I don't think so.
Okay, so just to lead off. And you have a couple questions, Mr. Mayor.
Looks like Councillor Zelinski and Councillor Moslin.
You'll have to call him, I can't see him.
Okay, Councillor Zelinski.
Where is this? I don't see an address or anything. Can someone tell me where it's at?
It's the Service BC building, and also where the flood recovery office is, that strip mall over there. Building.
Sorry, you broke up there. The Service BC and what else?
It's I guess the strip mall looking building where the recovery office was.
Graham's office.
Oh, Graham's, the satellite office. It's an L-shaped property that goes along Riverside and along Market and on Second.
Can you put the backup map up? Oh, that drawing.
Okay, I got about every second word there. I don't know if it's mine on my end or yours. But.
Okay, Councillor, it's the Service BC building, like that map that's on the screen right now. The top left property there is the Service BC building, and the other one is where the Ministry of Forests is in, along with the Recovery Office or Resiliency Office. So that's actually one big property. That's even though it's two different buildings.
Okay, and they want to put sand on the road. Is that what
So at the south side of the building, Kevin, can you scroll down a bit? Yeah, right there at the bottom is really their biggest concern. There, the height difference in between the walkway. There's a set of stairs that goes down to where it's a flat and level area. So I think they wanted to put sand primarily on that south side, and then along the right there along the what would that be, the west side, I guess, of the building. Yeah, right up here to make up for the height difference that there is in between the
And also the sidewalks on parking side.
well, and the dam itself would just go on the sidewalks because there's a level flat surface.
Okay. And there's no time limit for installation or demolishing this structure. Is that correct?
Through your worship, if council wanted to move forward with that, we would suggest council direct staff to have some parameters on it to ensure that if it does go up, it's needed and it's for the shortest duration possible.
Further questions I can't see.
Councillor Moslin.
Thank you. Yeah, I was completely puzzled about the location as well. with the request. So my understanding though is we're not talking sandbags, we're talking also some sort of, for want of a better thing, a tiger dam. That is some sort of water-filled bladder. And this structure would go on the sidewalks but not on the road. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
And what is the plan to anchor these bladders with? I mean, that was the expensive part last time we put tiger dams down, was installing, and even more expensive, uninstalling the anchors. I certainly hesitate to, I would need a little bit more information about this. The other concern, of course, is the people who cross from the tiger dam. We created a little island. We get in and out of the island. And we're just, for people across from Service BC, or which would be the CIBC Bank, or the people on the east side of Riverside, they're going to be facing these tiger dams and an increase of water in their area. So I think we need to know a lot more about this proposal. Thank you.
I'm reading this as something that at this point in time might be somewhat premature, and that it could cause public concern in terms of the rest of our protection of the downtown. The comment was made, if the water level reaches that level, we have a lot more problems in the downtown core than just that building. It doesn't feel like we want to discourage people from protecting their own properties, but at this point in time, I'm not really supporting this in terms of moving ahead quickly with it. Further comment, Christine Thompson?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Does this company own tiger dams, or would they be looking to the city to provide them?
At this point, he's looking at purchasing them privately. And so that's why he's looking for this approval, is so that he could plan for this to purchase those dams in advance.
Okay, thank you.
And Councillor Zielinski?
Yes, so correct me if I'm right, during the high water, the first bit we saw downtown was the parking lot in the, behind the fire hall. That's where it started to collect first. Is that correct? And then once the fire hall was flooded, it worked its way to Service BC. Do I have that correct?
That's pretty correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Corley? Councillor Corley? You're muted.
I know. So I guess my concern is, as well, is getting it too soon. The cost of anchoring and unanchoring. And just, what does this, what is that going to show the rest of the people? They're already suffering from this. It looks like I don't know, I think it could generate a lot of consternation in people not getting it. It's not, I understand why he wants to do it, because it costs so much money to repair and do all the building things, but I think it's a little premature.
Okay, are we at a point of making a decision on this? And again, without my agenda in front of me, do we have a recommended question here?
Well, I guess we're going to talk about it in 6B. But I do know that I did receive a phone call from a member of the chamber expressing concerns specifically about this request and the impact, if we have permitted that, it could have on their business if we allow this to go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So this is moving forward to a decision under 6B. Is that the way it's going?
Yeah, sorry, through your worship, we expected they were actually going to show up in a delegation and you'd be able to ask them a bunch of questions, and we found out late that they weren't going to, and that's why it was separated. That's the only reason.
Okay. All right, we dealt with this item so far as we can at this point. And hearing that, moving forward, reports from council. And I know Councillor Corlick, you did let me know you had a verbal report. And so I will start with Councillor Moslin report.
Okay, yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, these reports are often tricky to write because you have to write them 6 days ahead and submit them. I really did want to, because there seems to be some confusion about what exactly the province ordered us to do, okay? I was going to request that the staff put up those 3 orders on the screen. Basically, the 3 separate orders, I think they're MO2, Order 82, 83, 84, had to do with changing the charter to allow a non-public meeting of council. Also, the second one had to do with bylaw enforcement and using our municipal bylaw enforcement mechanisms to inform the health officers, but not yet to do any ticketing or discipline, and also to do the essential under the Emergency Program Act to deliver essential goods and services, which is basically the thing that I was quoting earlier. Basically, item 6 in, I believe it's Order 84, a local authority must take all measures necessary to, my first question is, must take all measures necessary to identify the resources and facilities within the local authority's area of jurisdiction that can be used to respond to or mitigate the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Have we done this? Has the local authority, I'm assuming that's the city, identified the resources and facilities that could be used to respond to mitigate the impacts?
So, through your worship, the order is upon request from the minister. We would provide that, but that is something that we've looked at. I asked the question the other day with the regional district and with their emergency management operations and whether they would be compiling that list and submitting it to Emergency Management BC, or if they were expecting the municipalities to do that. So kind of two-pronged. One is we haven't received the request to make those or identify the facilities, but we have asked the EOC as well whether their intent is to reach out to us or whether we should be doing it ourselves. I haven't heard back. I don't know if Graham or George have heard anything on that. So we'll have to follow up with them. I believe it was Chris Marsh and Mr. Mayor, I believe you were in on that call when we made that request.
Okay, thank you. The next one is item 8 in that same order. For the purpose of ensuring the effective management and delivery of critical services for vulnerable populations within the province, including food banks and shelter services, each local authority must use best efforts to provide assistance in the management and delivery of such services. So I guess, my same question, are we doing this?
Yeah, so through your worship, my understanding again of this order is where a void exists, and that's where we're working with Darren to try to understand if those services are being provided. Some of that information was understanding the Stay Safe shelter and what the next step in that process was, and he's indicated this BC Housing outreach funding. So at this point, it sounds like they have the funding. He's identified a couple of voids as far as that social distancing, and so I guess we'll address that probably more as we get into the 6B item.
Okay, thank you. I guess well, the other thing I would like to say, in addition to my report, which is there about Zoom and redesigning cities after all this is done, because it might not be done for quite a while, is basically a big thank you for me, from my family, to all those who continue to provide us with services, both essential services from grocery to fire protection. A big thank you to everybody out there, and a big thank you also to everybody who's trying their best in these difficult times to comply and with this concept of social distancing, putting a physical distance between us all. Thank you very much, Mayor. That's my report.
Thank you. And moving around the table, Councillor Corley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and everyone. Sorry I didn't get a written report in. I just want to say that I've attended a number of meetings since the last council meeting. It seems like it was eons ago. So on April 2nd, we sat in on a primary care meeting, and the primary care facilities there is under, I guess, it's in a big conversation about trying to establish one in Grand Forks. It presents a challenge because we have such a large and diverse area from Grand Forks west boundary, so there's a lot of considerations being taken into consideration to get that going. And personally, I think it's a great idea to be able to do that. So I look forward to attending and participating in future meetings on that. Castlegar is either they're up and running or just about with their primary care facility, and so it's going to be interesting to see how they go forward with that. So, and then we had workshops on the flood mitigation, and we're going to be working on that study, and I'm so happy to hear that there are plans or works in the process, and that it's so important to everyone to have an idea of what's going on. So thank you for everyone that's working on that, and communication to the public is paramount. It just keeps everybody at that level of at least knowing what's going on and having that communication process. So I think that's great. As from the RDKB, I'm going to be kind of sandwiching everything in. I've been trying to forward any regional district reports and things on to council, and I know they're being their RDKB website, and that has got all the information for EOC and the COVID-19, everything that's in place for that. And I mean, the COVID-19 is always it's a process. It's just changing almost hourly. It's huge, and I know everyone's working at their best to do the social distancing and everything like that. So the RDKB has passed the budget, and if you'd like to view that, there are 275 pages on the RDKB website. Have fun. Just to let everyone know, the bottle depot is closed, as well as the electronic recycling. Excuse me, curbside recycling is remaining in place. And originally, tipping fees at our local dump landfill site were being considered, under consideration to be raised, increased in the spring. However, that's been delayed till fall, where it will come under review and decision will be made then. Excuse me. So tomorrow there's a BCDC meeting where I'll bring up some of the questions we talked about earlier today. I did, and I want to thank Daniel and the Public Works for clarification of the water meters as versus pipe repairs. I had a question about that from one couple, and I think we're working with that. All in all, we're all working to ensure the best for our city through these trying times. And it just seems like it's been such a long time that Councillor Thompson and I attended the BC Economic Summit in Kelowna. It is so much has happened since then. As a whole, we're holding our own as a provincial economy at that point. Things have changed in the past month. Many communities are suffering as a result of the downturn in the forestry, and now all our economies are struggling. And so any way we can support them, and I notice there's a program in place now from the chamber and everything about supporting local businesses and getting boundary, what do you call it, bucks, and as a kind of reward for supporting our businesses. So with the onslaught of COVID-19, everything has changed. Local businesses, large and small, are concerned about their future. Social distancing has changed our interaction with one another. Zoom has become the method of conducting meetings. The RDKB website for information regarding the flood and COVID-19 is updated regularly. So, we thought the flood in 2018, well, it was a huge impact on our whole community. Now, we thought that it was huge. It's changed our lives. It did. Now we face a COVID-19 challenge. So let's take care of ourselves and one another. We will get through this. Every day I worry. My daughter is an ICU nurse and covers ER. And I never know from one day to the next how things are going to go with that. I just worry constantly. My daughter-in-law, she is exposed on a regular, every day as well. And so the scary part is we're not going to know what happens, and if something should happen, we won't be able to be with our loved ones. So I just worry all the time. So it's really important for us to stick together and with social distancing, but to have that we are working to protect our loved ones, all the people that are working so hard to keep us safe and out of problems. And I think that the parade the fire department had the other night was phenomenal. I just wish that we had known a little bit about it so we could be out and just supporting them a little bit more. So I guess all in all, I just want everyone to keep their heads up and know that we're working together under very difficult circumstances, and I commend everyone for their hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Moving to my left, Councillor Krog.
Mute myself. Hello? Okay.
We can hear you.
Yes, I don't have a report, but I did go to a meeting in my kitchen, and then I went for a meeting into the front room. So I've been all over the place, and that's about it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Krog. Councillor Zielinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to say a few things. First of all, I want to thank the EOC staff, George and all the people down at the fire department. I threw out some questions about our flood response, and answers came back. We're going to look at the RDKB emergency website for the keys and when things are going to start going sideways on us. We've been reported on where the sandbag locations are going to be. We know that sandbags are in place, and it's going to be good to see some of those details on our response if a flood happens. But I want to echo what everyone's saying. Unusual times, unusual future, and I just want to thank council, staff, and all the people involved, whether it's the grocery store people, emergency services, and for sure our hospital staff. It's great to see all the good that people have to offer in this situation, and even though we're just talking heads up here as far as the city's council, I just want to let the people of Grand Forks in the area know that I appreciate it, and my family does too. So keep up the good work. It's going to be a long haul, but I know we have the people in charge and the people acting on our best behalf, and I just want to say thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson, having a written report, you're on.
Thank you. I'm not going to read my report because everybody's had the opportunity to do that. However, I do want to say to Duncan, talk about baptism by fire, and I'm glad your family has relocated to Grand Forks with you. With respect to the primary care facilities, and that Councillor Corlatt referred to, Castlemore is not up and running yet, but they do have some information that I'm going to ask our management team to get a hold of Castlemore and see what information they have available that they might share with the city. I think this is an excellent program, and one that I know what the acute care costs are, and they're huge, as opposed to having a service like this where hospitalization can be avoided through this kind of care. And with respect to the COVID-19, I want to echo everybody else's comments and thanks to all of the people that are providing essential services, and to the community who are practicing social distancing. I can appreciate Councillor Corlatt's concern with regard to members of her family. I have a widowed sister who's on her own, and I call her every day to make sure that all is well with her. So, having said that, that's my report.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. And Councillor Studley.
Nothing much at this point. Just want to say, as an introvert, I'm absolutely loving this, but I know there's tons of extroverts out there that aren't so fond of all this quarantine, self-isolation, all that kind of stuff. So please reach out to the extroverts in your life, video chat with them, call them, text them, and just talk with them. That's what they like to do. So please keep in touch with all the extroverts in your life.
Thank you, Councillor. That's social labor, we've named that now. Reaching out to your friends. All right. Councillor, can we have a motion to accept council reports? Councillor Corlick, Councillor Moslin, all those in favor. And Councillor Corlick, the regional district report, did you want to say anything more on this matter? We kind of accepted it into your personal report.
I think that everybody is so involved in everything that I want to say that this COVID-19 is almost taken over all the reporting and all the things that everyone's working on. To say the budget was passed, and you're more than welcome to have a look at it. It's a lot of reading, but it's interesting. And the fact that, that everybody's trying to keep expenses to a minimum because we don't know where we're going in the next few months or how long this whole thing is going to take. And that the services, that the offices are closed, they're just like our city hall. They're available if we need them. And everybody's working hard and trying to do our social distancing, and all meetings are through Zoom. And it's a different way of conducting a meeting and participating in one. It's good to see everybody. I'm kind of the extroverted person that I do miss that interaction with people all the time, and that's the same with RDKB. I'm just getting to know the individuals and things that everybody is involved in, and the importance of learning from them. And there's just so many different oversights. And yeah, I touched on basically the things that are going on in my council report, and we'll have more. It's just from the last meeting, everything's changed, and I did miss one meeting in March because of Councillor Thompson and I were in Kelowna, and we had a little mishap, and so by the time I got home, I didn't make a meeting, so yeah. But all's well. We're doing good, and as a region, we're doing well too. The best we can in these circumstances.
Just to remind you that tomorrow you'll be meeting with the rest of the region, which is a really important connection for us. That is Midway, Greenwood area C, D, and E at the Boundary Economic Development package.
Yes. And I just wanted to say the little mishap was I totaled my car.
As long as it wasn't drunk and disorderly, we're good.
No, it was not drunk and disorderly.
I can hope not, because it was at 8 o'clock in the morning.
All right. Motion to accept the regional district report from Councillor Gordon and Councillor Studley, Councillor Thompson, all those in favor. Okay, moving back to the agenda. Give it back to me.
B. 6A.
Okay, 6B is the
Decisions from delegations.
The regional delegations, Mayor Taylor. First one is the CREM Holdings. Can we deal with that matter first?
And through your worship, a couple pieces of information before a motion is made, if I may.
Breaking up, I'm sorry I missed that.
Just a couple pieces of information that additional before the motion is made, if that's okay?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the first piece is any of your concerns regarding, anchoring, or George actually just brought up a very valid concern around having two dams and the infrastructure underneath of that dam and the ability to support that infrastructure, weight-wise.
Not weight-wise, it's just room.
And room-wise as well, yeah.
Through the mayor, yes. I don't know if the site on Riverside Ave will support two dams. Basically what we had was the Tiger Dam in 2018 was two sections on the bottom with another section on top. The anchoring system was quite complex. I'm not sure how big the water bladder that CREM Holdings is looking to install there, but I don't believe it'll be installed just on the sidewalk. One, regarding the size, and two, for the anchoring system. Again, just the one bladder system that we had in 2018 impeded the traffic heavily on Riverside Ave.
Yeah, and so through your worship, on one hand, if council chooses to try to accommodate this, we can ensure that a license to occupy addressed all of these concerns, and if it couldn't address these concerns, then it wouldn't be permitted. The other piece is some information that Daniel has regarding why the request has come forward, I guess, and what you had in front of you was submitted by the applicant, and pretty critical information probably was missed.
Yeah, so I also had a phone call with the applicant on this, Mr. Mayor, and it seems as when the repair had to be done the last go around after the flood, it was about $1 million worth of damage to the property. Which resulted in challenges receiving further insurance, and I'm not 100% sure if mortgage was involved with this as well, but ultimately the owner simply wants to do whatever they can so they don't have that same kind of damage again by protecting their building. They were only going to put this up if it's absolutely necessary. The system that they were looking at was like a one-use system, so they don't want to spend the I think $50,000 or something like that, putting this whole thing together just for fun. And as far as I know, they wanted to do it right along their property, so not further out on the road or anything like that, like right by the building, so that the minimum amount of length of the aqua dam would be needed. So that's what was explained to me verbally. Kevin and I did ask the applicant or the agent of the applicant to speak today. But he was unable to make it. So I hope this helps.
Okay, I'm seeing a direction developing here with this. Do we have a motion on the table? Again, I'm at a loss here in terms of one screen.
I got a question, Mr. Mayor, please.
Councillor Zielinski.
Yeah, just whether or not timing of events might help out. I'm kind of assuming that by the time Service BC building says, hey, we better do something, the back of the fire hall will be flooded and a state of emergency should be called by that time, which kind of opens up a lot of things. Does this seem reasonable that a state of emergency should probably be called before there's water issues at that site?
So through your worship, I guess the easiest answer is there's a phased approach throughout the community that has a response plan as waters hit different levels, George and Graham, and so there would be a response plan in place before it ever got to that building. So maybe add on that, or is there any more I'm missing there?
I don't think so. I think you've covered everything.
I can't say we would have hit a local state of emergency. Not being here last time and being unfamiliar with it, I'm treading very cautiously, but we can say we would, in partnership with the regional district, initiated some of those first stages within our plan by the time it got there, yes.
Okay, can we frame a motion here, councillors?
Can I say something, please?
Councillor Johnson.
If this were to be approved, this request, are we setting a precedent for any other businesses that may want to do the same thing?
So through your worship, yeah, I mean they're going to be decided upon by council on an individual basis, but you could be setting a precedence, and further, you could be making people feel that they need to be independent in these circumstances where the global approach is a little better. Now, having said that, I'm very aware and sympathetic that this may also be in response to insurance and the ability to get insurance. So you have to weigh both of those out. That's difficult, and I'm glad I'm not in your shoes.
Well, I'm prepared to put forward a motion.
Councillor, go ahead.
My motion is that the request from CREM Holdings be denied.
And the seconder for that motion. Councillor Studley, I see your hand. Further discussion? This is a motion to deny that request, and certainly not underestimating the concern of the applicant here for this action.
There's some hands up.
And I see Moslin, Zielinski, and Krog. Moslin.
I was just trying to vote.
You trying to vote?
Go ahead, Neil.
No, I was just trying to vote.
Councillor Moslin, you voting, or I thought we were heading for a vote, but
Yeah.
I just had a question, Your Worship.
go ahead.
Yeah, I can see the quandary that the Chief Administrative Officer just put in front of us. Do we want to discourage all individual efforts when, of course, the regional district has made it quite clear that that the responsibility for the first reaction is on the landowner. But I do have some real concerns about the actual anchoring and structural impact of assembling tiger dams at this location. Would it be appropriate to ask for a relatively quick? I've heard the concerns from the fire chief. I'm wondering if there would it be possible, or would it be beneficial if we had a more thorough staff report on this request? That would be my question, Your Worship.
So through your worship, if council provides direction, we will ensure, and really the direction would be direct staff to enter into a license of occupancy, and our job will be to ensure that we protect our infrastructure and we don't put our infrastructure at risk, whether it be insurance, liability, etc., actual physical damage. So if council wants to move forward with this, and the direction is enter into a license of, to occupy this space and protect our infrastructure, it would only move forward if we could check off all of those boxes.
So I'm hearing too, Duncan, that this might have beneficial impact on insurance coverage for this owner. Is it possible that our flat refusal would be negative, and that if we left the door open here in terms of us approving it with certain conditions or a staff report on the implications, that would still leave them in a beneficial position with their insurance agent?
Yeah, and that would be a question that I don't necessarily, through your worship, would be addressed through a staff report. That could be a question directed back at the individual and they could provide some additional information. As far as a staff report, I don't know what more information I could include in a report for you than what we have today, other than if you want to do it, you can direct us to enter into a license and we would address infrastructure, and only at that point, if there were concerns, it would come back to council to say we're doing this at our own risk.
Okay, so Councillor Thompson has a motion on the floor without a seconder.
I thought Zach seconded it.
I didn't see.
Councillor Selinsky.
Okay. We're going to vote on this, further discussion on it. This is to refuse the request.
Councillor Selinsky is still.
Walensky and then Thompson, your name's still up?
Yeah, a comment. I'm not too worried about precedence or anything. What I am worried about is damage to the infrastructure. So whether, and public use of city use, I guess. So whether or not it's a license of occupation and a damage deposit on anything done in a time frame when things have to be out of there. If all those details could be worked out, I have no problem a person trying to protect their own property. But there's all those other details as far as damaging the city infrastructure.
So this question is specifically to this request in this location. So we have a motion on the floor and further discussion. Councillor Thompson.
Yes, thank you. If this resolution passes, there is nothing to preclude the applicant from providing us more information and documentary evidence with respect to his insurance. But as it stands now, we have his request in writing. He has talked to Daniel, but he certainly hasn't made an attempt to talk to council, and that causes me some concern. If they were really determined that they needed to do this, then they should have made themselves available to us to ask them the questions.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. And nothing further, I'm going to call the question. The motion is to turn down the request. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I didn't see anybody voting no. Did I miss anyone? Councillor Moslin voted no? Okay. So the motion is passed, and that is a motion to turn this down with the understanding, as Councillor Thompson said, if there's more to this than meets the eye. We turned down a very specific proposal. If they have alternatives to put in front of us, I think we're still open to hearing. Councillor Thompson, is that clear?
Yes, it is.
Okay, moving on to the agenda.
Oh, Boundary Family Services.
Yeah.
So again, with your permission, Mr. Mayor, to provide some context?
Please do.
Okay, so a couple things that came out throughout the discussion regarding liability and some of those pieces. Now, no motion is on the table. I don't know, I think we could answer a lot of your questions today without bringing a report back. If liability is a concern of council, you could include that in any motion of approval, saying provided we can mitigate any additional liability, because you probably have some liability now. And so there's a couple different ways you could go about it. If your concern is regarding the public and some feedback from the public, another opportunity is a notice of intent indicating in principle, we like this idea, but we want to get some feedback from the public. So there are a couple ways you could address it. If there are or is questions regarding something you'd want to see in a staff report, I would love an opportunity to answer some of those right now.
Okay, let's kick this off with my position on this. I'm totally against developing Moto as a site. I feel that the numbers are going to increase and that we're forcing people who are not in this group into that group in future. We know that there are a lot of difficulties with drug use that exist in the homeless community, and this would put anyone new coming into that same category. There's no in and out control, and so like Boundary Family said, there's two groups of two. They're not providing anything in terms of internal supervision. I'm afraid that this is like creating basically an urban jungle. And so I'm open to look at what other things that we can do to support this, but I think it's a large capital investment to bring anything in terms of sanitary, in terms of propane cooking. All of those things are going to cost money. I'd rather see those capital items go into a program that supervises and supports people, but not in this location. I'm with Councillor Krog. I'm totally against it. Having said that, I've opened up for further comments.
Councillor Zielinski.
Zielinski is first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to preclude what Darren and his group and that community knows to be fact. I kind of like the idea of the lease hold that Councillor Krog mentioned as far as getting our liability out of it. I have a lot of other concerns, but if Darren wants to take this on, and that's about the only way I can support it, is if it was a lease of moto, they take all liability, fires, and everything else that would occur on that property and just outside the property. So I don't know if they want to take on that liability myself, but that's about the only way I can vote in favor of this myself.
So can I clarify where we're at with this decision? Basically, it looks like we're exploring things that we want more information from our staff on. And so moving it forward, Councillor Thompson.
Well, I hear what the concerns are. I would like to see the council support that, subject to the liability issue being dealt with and a license of occupation or for 90 days, or whatever it takes, so that this can proceed. It's not going to cost the city any money. I understand that it's the province that will be paying for this, because Darren said he had submitted a budget. So rather than not having anything up there, I would like to see some sort of controls put in, and I do believe that porta potties and sanitary stations and the like will help to offset some of the other issues that are being done and being concerned.
Thank you. And Councillor Krog?
Not right this second. I've got my hand up, but I'll wait till somebody else speaks.
And moving down, Councillor Moslin, and then Corlick.
Okay, that's pretty tricky, Councillor Krog. But I would support what Councillor Thompson says. I did read, the Emergency Act has asked us to must support. I too have real reservations about this site. I would perhaps ask the mayor what would be his preferable site to this one. Nonetheless, I believe that doing something is going to be better than doing nothing, and that it will not only benefit the people who are currently residing in Moto, but it will benefit the town as a whole. If that population has access to sanitation and clean and good food, doing nothing if they don't have access to sanitation, so more public urination, and they don't have access to food. Okay, so now we're over at the community kitchen. Well, this is an alternative. This is 90 days. I would like to see perhaps a motion that the city grant a license of occupation to Boundary Family Support Services to deliver the service of Moto for 90 days. Nonetheless, that's my thinking, Mayor, and maybe, Mayor, would you give us an alternate location. This was the same challenge that somebody put forward to Councillor Krog earlier, and he, of course, dodged that one too. Anyhow,
I actually answered it.
that we don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know what? I disagree. I think we do have to do something, that the public order makes it very clear that we must do something. And doing nothing doesn't fit the bill. However, I do, Councillor and Mayor, see your concerns, both for liability. I certainly have great empathy for that. And I certainly see that the location is not ideal either. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Okay, and Councillor Moslin has basically asked me to indicate if I had considered any other appropriate sites. The only other site that offers fence control all the way around it, has a commercial kitchen, has space to distance people, would allow us to bring people off the riverfronts and basically give them an ultimatum to move to another location that we identified, is Donaldson Park. It's sitting there. There will not be any use of it this year. The kind of performance that Boundary Family Services put into place at the warming center at the shelter shows that in and out control is a major part of being able to deal with this population in one place. So I think some serious consideration should be given to the Donaldson Park location. And moving to
Me.
who was up next here?
I was first, but then I backed off. Now I'm back.
Oh yeah, just fit in wherever you like.
Yeah.
Councillor Krog.
Okay. Yeah, that's one of the biggest things that's missing is what the mayor just mentioned, the in and out, and that's why that the Stay Safe shelter worked way better than the other shelter, was because of the control. Now, the problem is that if it's moto, they're still gonna be in town all day, every day, and then they go back to moto. So it doesn't, it doesn't stop them from socializing. It doesn't do any of the things. When the government's telling us that we must or we have to do something, it's in relation to COVID, not in relation to the overall homeless situation, right? It's specific to COVID. So having them all gather at Moto is no different than having them in a shelter. Donaldson Park, I don't think would ever fly, but I think it might be a super good facility. And if it had the supervision, one of the reasons people don't want to go to Moto or to hang with some of the other people is they're afraid of them. So if there was a way to segregate and to get everybody into the same place, that would make sense. But I still want a staff report, like a legal opinion to start with, about our liability and whether or not a license of occupation or anything else will take any of that stuff away.
Can I ask Neil, in your questions to staff, in the staff report, would a site like that allow us to move people from the riverfront and some of the other encampments, the 7 or 8 other encampments around town? So the question would be, are we within our legal rights to force people out of inappropriate riverfront locations into a safe location?
Well, that's what everybody's saying we're supposed to be doing for the most vulnerable population. So, yes, I would be just saying, dude, we've got a space for you, but this isn't it.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. And I see a number of hands up. Can we go to Councillor Corlick, who hasn't spoken?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I have major concerns about the liability and you can't force anybody into anything. And if you were thinking of Donaldson Park, that just puts everybody in a enclosed area that's almost like a jail. And seeing how so much of the property and surroundings are destroyed, literally destroyed, during and after these people decide to leave, if they ever do, I'm major concerned about that. I also don't think that Moto, you can't make anybody stay in one place. And social distancing, you can't make them. You can't make, it's impossible, because it is all about, it's almost tribal, because it's all for one and whatever. I mean, and there's fear and there's all this stuff, but I just don't know. I don't know what the answer is, honestly. And I don't know, personally, if, this sounds awful, but if they're out in their individual camps, they're probably better protected than they are in an enclosed situation, because they're not socializing or being with everybody right cheek to jowl. I don't know if Moto's the solution. I really don't believe Donaldson Park is the solution. It's 90 days. I guaranteed 90 days. I think we need to have more information about that, and at the end of 90 days, they're not going to leave Moto. It's just that the porta potties will be gone. Basically, that's all. And I don't know. I think we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, quite frankly.
I see Zach has been waiting there. Zach, I don't see a button for your hand up. But
no problem.
Yeah.
Just to let you know.
You gotta remember what was on the table is their use of Moto, right? Ken, where he just put stuff at Moto. So I don't know how we started talking about Donaldson Park or anything, but that's not on the table at this moment. So I just wanted to sort of bring us back down to that. So the question on the table is, do we allow Bentron Services to put stuff at Moto?
I think what's on the table, Zach, the way I understand it is we're asking for a staff report, and so looking at alternatives seems to be a reasonable discussion to put out in front. And moving to Zelensky.
Thank you. So is that where we are at the staff report? And we're going to move forward from there, because right off the bat, for me, Donaldson Park is a no. But my question would be, we're talking 90 days, we're talking Boundary Family Services, we're chasing dollars again, we're not chasing the problem. So whether it's 90 days, 120 days, what are we going to do about Moto anyway? Is where we're at.
And for clarification, a motion, there's no motion on the table at this time, it's just discussion. So a staff report is one of the options that's been brought forward, but there has been no motion.
I thought Councillor Mosler made a motion. He did, I would second it.
I don't believe a motion has been made yet. Kevin or Daniel?
I don't have one.
We don't have a motion yet.
I did not make a motion, sorry.
Just
Sorry, I
discussion.
thought you had. Then I would make a motion.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson, is for a staff report. Do we want to make that motion at this point?
I don't. I would like to put forward a motion that the request from Boundary Family Services for the use of the Moto for a 90-day period as per their request be approved, subject to their providing a license of occupation and some assurance of the insurance issue, liability issue.
Okay.
And a seconder for that motion.
Not me. I'm just waiting to speak.
Motion. And so we're still in discussion. Councillor Krog?
I seconded it, Mayor. Did it get?
I did get that. Thank you.
Yes, so speaking to the motion, I don't think we should be making a motion without all the information and a staff report. So it's not like this has to be done. It's not the 11th hour. Like, we can have that information to make sure that we're doing the best by the committee or the community as a whole. So I want to see a staff report, so I will not support the motion.
Okay, Councillor Zelinski.
Thank you. So unfortunately, property is not delineated. We don't know where the corners of the property is, even if Boundary Family wanted to do a lease. It's not zoned appropriately. Other issues, and that's what I'll be voting. I'll be opposing the vote on this one. Thanks.
And as I spoke before, I'll be opposing the motion. I think this is a really wrong decision to be making at this point. Further discussion before we call the question. So this is to endorse based on further information on liability and a license of occupation to be in place with Boundary Family Service. Is that correct, Councillor Thompson?
Yes, it is. And can I request that you call each member of council so that they can record their vote, yea or nay?
Yeah, right, like I know how to do that.
Well, you just go around the table.
Yes, yeah. All right. All right, Councillor Corlick, let's start with you. You're in my pictures here.
Do you think?
This is calling the question.
I know. No, I don't support it.
Councillor Thompson.
I support it.
Councillor Zelinski.
No, I do not.
Councillor Studley.
No.
Councillor Moslin.
I support it.
Councillor Krog.
I had to unmute myself. I do not.
And I do not. Does that cover the whole council? And what was the vote? I wasn't keeping track.
It failed.
Defeated.
Defeated.
So does that push it back to a staff report option here that if we're not going ahead with yay or nay? Can we?
I would move a staff report.
And seconded by?
With a legal opinion.
Councillor Corlick, and I would assume that, you know, as we've done in the past, any liability issue is going to involve checking with our lawyers.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I have my hand up there, but in that staff report, I do want them to please address what are we going to do after the 90 days? What are we going to do that 120 days?
A plan for after the 90-day period, what would that be with Boundary Family Services?
No, we have people squatting on our land has put us in a liability situation. So I want to see how staff's going to get us out of that.
So yeah, okay. So a comprehensive look at our liability for people camping on our lands that are squatters. Okay, Councillor Thompson speaking.
Are we asking the city to expend money with a land surveyor to get a description of the properties by meets and bounds?
Did you get a second?
Duncan, is this going to cost us money to identify the license of occupation? Is that your question, Councillor Thompson?
Yes.
Yes. So first of all, I don't know if we got a seconder to Councillor Krog's motion. Did we?
We did get a seconder. I think it was
Councillor Corlick? Okay.
Yes.
And so if we were going to enter into a lease, generally you need some parameters around that property. Dolores, I don't know if you've dealt with some of these leases or licensed to occupy?
We could just do a description
Yeah.
from corner posts or something like that if we're not too concerned that the boundaries are a little fuzzy.
Yeah. So we have the ability to identify the property and leave the responsibility up to the occupier to define that boundary themselves. Just a quick question to Councillor Krog. As far as liability, are you requesting information regarding the liability on that site or liability in general across the community as far as not removing individuals from green space?
No, I am actually talking that specific organized site.
An organized site?
Yeah, because that's basically what it is, and that's what we're talking about. And I believe that just because we have kind of an awesome mapping system, we can probably come up with a map of the property as Ms. Sheet said.
Okay, and Councillor Zielinski, your 90-day plan is specific for that site or any site that council could potentially approve as far as an organized site?
Basically, this is one site that the city does have title to, as opposed to the people on the crown land on the riverbank. But mine is just, yeah, if they started a fire tomorrow and it burnt down Valley Heights, do we have enough money to pay for everybody's houses?
Okay, Duncan, have we clarified this enough?
Sure. So the two questions you will receive an answer from me on is regarding 90 days and what that plan would look like with Boundary Family Services, and if they had a site, how would they close that site up? And the second question is, if we allowed an organized site, we would like a legal opinion on our ability to relocate people to that site and whether we take on liability as far as any actions that come about from that site.
Yeah.
Council, I'd certainly like to see us keep track of numbers here as well. And again, I'm predicting that more people will be in financial distress. We can't guarantee that numbers are not going to be increasing substantially. So keeping our eyes open on this. The motion is on the floor. Are you ready for a vote? This is to ask for a staff report and with the items that we placed on the table in our discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? I see no opposition. Motion is passed. Thank you, and back to the agenda. And I guess we got out of line here because the regional district report we had already from Councillor Corlick.
Moving on to recommendations from staff.
Decisions.
Yeah.
Okay. The DMAF Land Acquisition Review Panel Terms of Reference. And the motion is spelled out to us here. I have a little difficulty reading it with my picture in the way, but can we get this motion on the floor for discussion?
So moved.
Councillor Thompson, and seconded by, I don't see hands, Councillor Zielinski. Opening it up for discussion. Do you want some context on this? We had the workshop, Councillor Krog wasn't there, I believe.
Yeah, just got one question. And didn't we see this before in another report? Like, wasn't this all spelled out to us before now?
Through the mayor, this was laid out as a kind of initial heads up that it was coming, but there was no council decision on it at that time. The land acquisition team has spoken to the need of wanting to initiate this process as they're preparing for a small number of appeals and want to have the process laid out. The only piece remaining on this is just the selection and recruitment of the individuals, which is a matter for staff discussion, I understand, to identify an approach and have it brought back to council. But the overall framework of being able to initiate that process is what's on the table now.
Well, I have to say I thought it was an excellent report, and it laid out very clearly what the DMAF, the team wants to do. So my compliments to the authors of that report.
So I think it's critical too that it's not our planning staff, it's not the city or Keystone that's choosing these individuals out there, that we're going to have a very independent process of review. Yeah, I think that's the critical part that we can recognize here is what we're approving.
through your worship, in brainstorming with the team here, there are some opportunities to make that independent. That's a report for a different day. Really, we need to understand what the committee's doing before we get down to the brass tacks of figuring out who's going to sit on it. But there's been some really good ideas generated on how we can make that removed from the city and make it independent. So look forward to seeing that report later if this report is approved.
All right, thank you, Duncan. Any further question on this matter? Any further discussion? Being none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Justin, you want to help out?
Thank you.
The next one.
Next item.
That chair is getting worked out.
Yeah.
Early capital budget approvals, that's where we are at 8B. There are a number of items there that are on the early approval list. Duncan, would you like to put some context to this?
Sure, I'd ask Justin to speak to probably could speak to all three, or at least two of them, and Dolores can. Justin.
Sure. So in January 20th, if council may or may not recall, I put forward the 2020 capital budget. We talked about the 2019 projects rolled over and then the new ones that were in 2020. One of the 2019 critical projects that I asked for approval on and included on that plan was the industrial lift station. And this is the lift station that goes from downtown pumps in between that and the wastewater treatment plant. It services the North Ruckle for wastewater as well as the Rockwell site. So in the 2018 flood, it was significantly damaged. And the team, obviously, because it was such critical infrastructure, did a good job, although a rough job, admittedly, in putting that station back together. No further repairs or work was done on that lift station as it sits today. There was and is outstanding an insurance issue around this. I don't think that is specifically relevant for today's discussion. That's more about the 2018 flood. What is relevant for today's discussion and the question put forward is we're seeking early budget approval for this and a few other projects which we'll get into so we can action these items literally immediately in preparation for any risks of flooding in 2020. Specifically what we're looking at doing for the industrial lift station is putting a structure on top of the existing vault, the current vault. If you're not aware, I think in the report there were some pictures. It's actually somewhat sunken into the ground, which doesn't make it very safe for any kind of flood event, because obviously that will fill up. That vault has mechanical systems in it and mostly electrical systems in it. So what we're proposing on doing is creating a structure above that, and we've looked at various options in regards to a C-can, wood frame, and ultimately what you have in front of you, which is a more permanent structure of a CMU or concrete masonry unit building. And then what we would like to do is move the electrical systems that are in the vault up and into that new structure, which will take them out of the flood risk going from that perspective. You'll see, as attached to the report, a budget that was provided by one of our local contractors to do this. It's a little rough at this point, but given the risk associated with and the time frames associated to the 2020 freshet, I did want to give council at least some indication of what we were planning on doing and some budget allowances. If that is probably the most expensive. If we went with another stick frame, then that budget would probably be cheaper relative to that. The other request associated to that is potentially a sole source, or would be a sole source to that specific contractor. Just given that we've done all the groundwork in regards to and the design work with them at this point, and again, that's strictly due to the time frames of the risk. We don't have a lot of time to go out there, get other multiple quotes, get other multiple designs, because we kind of need to go with kind of what we did what we've got. Most of this was done actually prior to my arrival with Public Works. So we're kind of just working off of their work today. I'll stop there and ask any specific questions about that, and then we can go on to the other project as well.
Questions, council? We don't have any of these three motions on the table open for questions. I don't have pictures here, but okay, we're going with Councillor Moslin, Zielinski, and then Thompson. Moslin, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Dinsdale. I guess the point is, the hope is that with this amount of money, that the work could be completed before Freshet 2020. Well, that would be somewhere between the space of 4 to 6 weeks, I'm assuming.
That is correct.
Okay, so I guess I'm just sort of scratching my head. Is it, the real question, is that really possible? Do you think we can move those systems and construct a cement building to shelter them in the space of 4 to 6 weeks?
It's impossible, it's impossible. It's possible to do that if we start tomorrow, which literally I have a team lined up to start as soon as that. We just obviously wanted to get formal approval. The one thing that I should mention as part of the plan is that the existing electrical infrastructure is identical to, and I can't remember it, it's a 5th Street pump station, I believe, my understanding from the team. So the idea is that we're not building this from scratch. We're actually taking that entire system and swapping it out with a new one that is been basically parked on a shelf up until this point. So that tremendously speeds up the process. As for the concrete masonry building to put that up, probably in under a week you could get that done.
Councillor Zielinski, or Councillor Monson, did you have a follow-up?
No, I'll defer to Councillor Zielinski. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Zielinski.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that we're very secure on legal access to the site and any leasehold that we need to increase the footprint there and make sure that's been covered too on this project.
Yeah, so I think what you're referring to, Councillor, is that the closeness of the property lines behind this. I know working in front of it and working with Rockwell, there's no issues in regards to that, because obviously this is completely beneficial to them as well. Just to refresh Council's memory, when we talked about this in January, there's potential that we actually remove this existing lift station, but the cost of doing that would mean that we would need to have a lift station put back over onto Rockwell. And at this point, I don't think Rockwell would be accepting of that. And it's actually more cost effective to the tune of potentially a couple of, so the total budget that was asked for in 2019 was $300,000. I figure that I can accomplish most of this, if not all of it, for the budget that you see in front of you, which is $125,000, which is a savings of almost $200,000, versus the risk of saying we're not going to do anything and we'll move this over to Rockwell at some point, and then Rockwell having some issues with that from an industrial perspective. So I don't know if I clarified that.
This project is very needed, and anybody that's voting against it, I'll be PMing you very soon.
Thanks, Councillor. I appreciate that. And I would concur with Councillor Zielinski.
Councillor Thompson
is right.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think the reports that were provided accompanying these resolutions were very explicit and detailed, and I am quite prepared to put forward a motion for the budget approval of the $125,000 for the industrial lift station rebuild project and the direct award contract of $51,466.34 to MSC Enterprises to complete the construction of the concrete building for the industrial lift station project to be funded from reserves.
So you're wrapping those two motions together?
Yes, I am.
And Can we have a seconder for that? Councillor Moslin's been waiting for another comment here. Councillor Corlick seconds that. And Councillor Moslin, there is a motion on the floor for the first two motions. Opening for you.
I'm good, Your Worship. Thank you.
And that looks like that's it for questions. Any further discussion on this? So we have the first two motions on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, moving on to the third motion.
Do you want to speak to that?
Please.
I'll just ask Dolores to come up because she's got better specifics than I do on this. Thanks, Councillor.
Are there any questions?
Councillor Moslin, raising your hand.
Thanks, Your Worship. I certainly support this request, Your Worship, but I do have one concern, and that is that the proposed bridge does not seem to have a gate or bollards. There is no impediment to vehicular traffic or unapproved vehicular traffic on that bridge. Do you have any plans for that?
Through Your Worship, yes, we do. That's just the bridge structure. We have been in discussions about actually having bollards built right on the edge of the bridge. As well, we'll be putting some sort of structures back at the road to ensure that it's just foot traffic and pedal bike traffic, and we will be putting up some signage for no motorized traffic.
Thank you.
Further comments, questions? Councillor Thompson.
I would be prepared to put forward a motion. Oh, I just lost my motion. Oh, there it is. That council approved early budget approval of $15,000 for the Saddle Lake Spillway Bridge project, which provides access to the Saddle Mountain Airport beacon site to be funded from reserves.
And a seconder for that motion is Councillor Moslin. Further comments and questions? Councillor Zielinski has his hand up.
And I guess I thought I saw this in the budget already. This is not add-on again. It's already been in those numbers that we've been given already.
Correct.
Further comment? Seeing none, asking for the question. All those in favor of the motion, Councillor Thompson's motion. Carried. That covers that item, and moving back to the agenda. And the next item is the 2020 budget recommendations, and I believe that Duncan has some words to give us at this point on this matter.
Sure. So through your worship, a very difficult first report to write. Just not having that institutional knowledge and that background, and not being here for the first report. However, I think it's important to note that this really came about through some early discussions with council, and although the report's coming from staff, this is definitely a council decision, and council has really initiated the thought and the discussion around this topic. I was just really the mechanism to get it in front of council. So there's two recommendations there. One is regarding the general tax increase. The other is regarding the implementation of the utility rate increase. And as noted in the report is silent regarding utility bills and waiving that. And I expect council will want to have some discussion in that area or make a motion in that area as well.
So should we start here with the general tax increase, moving it to 2% from 4%? If you make that motion.
I would like to, before I make a motion, comments from the Chief Financial Officer with respect to the implications.
Come on down. So, and I will definitely note through your worship that I would not move a wheel being a brand new employee here with the city. without working very closely with Juliet to understand the impact. So she's just on her way down to the
mic. About that, Duncan, at all.
Yeah. She's on her way down now.
And Councilor Zelinski.
Well, can the CFO answer my question first, please?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the impact of this drop in the tax revenues, it would be about $76,000 less revenue. And with the water, we're not talking about the water sewer yet. I was looking at the whole picture. So, what we've done is we've kind of polled staff as to where they could have some savings. So we've identified some savings there that we could offset this and still leave us with potential. We're not sure what additional costs there might be as a result of the COVID-19 situation. So certainly the savings would offset the reduction in taxes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And moving to Councilor Zelinski.
Thank you. So we don't know specifically where the savings were or the money was cut from. And I guess I'd like to, at some point in time, Mr. Mayor, sort of blow up this discussion with anything we can do for the community as far as deferring any penalties, whether it's on utilities or taxes, but any other things that we might be able to dig out of our back pocket to help the taxpayers during this time. I'd like to have that discussion too.
I think we're going to enter into that on the next motion here, Raj.
Okay, but so the savings to get down to this 2% from 4%, it's not specific to one heading or title. It's just we're just going to be tighter on the numbers. Is that what I'm hearing?
No. So through your worship, I would never say that there's enough slush fund that we could have a tax reduction and not feel that. It is purely a result of not hiring some vacant positions and having some gaps in salary here over the next 3 months or so. And also, we're not attending conferences and training. Those are really the two areas this is coming from. So there are positions we are unable to fill right now, and so we're taking those wages and offsetting them or deferring, and that's where the savings is coming from.
Good with that, Councilor Zelinski? All right, this is the reduction to 2% that's on the table. I see Christine Thompson's name still up there.
Okay, I would put forward a motion that council direct staff to reduce the 4% general taxation increase previously approved and currently included in the financial plan down to 2%.
And the seconder for that motion, Councilor Corlick. Further discussion on the matter? Councilor Zelinski?
Councilor, I believe you're muted.
I'm just wondering what we're approving. I don't see a budget in front of us, so we can't really. We're not approving a budget. We're approving direction for staff to do number crunching for something to come back to us. By the looks of it. Yeah.
So through your worship, my understanding is the interim CAO wrote a report regarding 4%, which council had endorsed, and essentially this is changing that to have the financial plan reflect 2%. So the next step in the process, you will have the financial plan in front of you, and it will reflect a 2% general taxation increase, and then you will see the corresponding tax rates, and the process will continue from there.
And I think, Councilor Zelinski, you'll see the details of where those savings came from, that we weren't trimming fat, but actually taking advantage of some of the savings that are happening for good or bad.
Okay, just one other quick question. The bylaw received 3 readings, I believe, so we'll have to rescind the 3rd reading. Am I correct in that?
Bylaw has not been brought forward at this point.
It was only at a committee of the whole meeting, Councillor, as an introductory piece.
Oh, for the budget?
Yeah.
Okay, my mistake then.
That will be the next step.
Okay.
All right,
Excellent.
Councilor, you ready for the question on this matter? Councilor Thompson's motion. Can you clarify your motion, Councilor Thompson?
The council directs staff to reduce the 4% general taxation increase previously approved and currently included in the financial plan down to 2%.
And we have a seconder on that, calling for the question. All those in favor?
In favor.
Looks like unanimous. Thank you very much. Next item.
Just a quick question. After this item,
No, the utility
we
rates.
have a quick break, please. Can we recess this meeting or?
Yeah, they're on it right now.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the very top.
It's only been 5 hours. Okay, we're moving into bylaws. Do we, you know, if we can...
No.
No.
Mr. Mayor, there is a second resolution for the, for this item regarding utility rates.
The council directs staff to delay implementation of 3.5 utility rate. That's what's on the table. Open for discussion. And Councilor Thompson and Councilor Zelinski.
I would put forward that motion.
And the seconder for that. Councilor Corlick, further discussion. Councilor Zelinski, have your hand up.
Yeah, I'll open the discussion, not only the 3.5% utility increase, but first of all, if I can get educated by staff, late payments on property taxes come due and enforce when and at what percent?
So no, go ahead, Juliet. Deadlines?
Hey, through the mayor, the deadline for taxes is the first working day after July 1st, so I believe that's July 2nd. And the penalty is a 10% penalty that's imposed the day after that. So on July 3rd, there would be a 10% penalty. This is mandated by the province too, so until unless we were to get word otherwise, we would have to proceed with that.
Yeah, I guess my preference would be not only this utility rate increase that we've already approved, but I'd like to see deferring the penalty on taxes and penalty on any utilities until sometime in the fall. So, but I'm willing to support this motion as it is.
So through your worship, just in respect to the legislation, what council could do is amend the resolution to say that we would delay the implementation of the utility rate, and we would lobby the province during our next call to reconsider their property tax deadlines and their fees, I guess, associated with late penalties.
So I'm not talking about deadline for taxes because we have no control over that, but we do have control over the percentage of late fees. I believe that's not a provincial mandate. So whether it's 10% or whether we want to charge 0.5%, that's up to us, if I'm not correct.
So through your worship, Juliet is indicating it's to the province, that late fee, but we could take a double look and we'll confirm that.
I'm seeing Councilor Moslin's hand up here.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I guess I just want to make sure what utilities we're talking about. We're talking about wastewater, are we? And as well as water, fresh water, but we're not talking about electrical rate. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, the proposal that was brought forward at the time of the 4% tax increase was a 3.5% increase in water and wastewater, but the budget was for 0% taxing, 0% increase in the electrical utility. So the proposal now is to delay implementing that 3.5% increase in water and wastewater.
So that is the motion on the table at this point, and I think we can expand that, Councilor Zelinski, if you want to continue on with any more detail on utilities. But what's in front of us is the the 3.5% issue.
Yeah, so after this, if it's okay with everyone, after we get rid of this motion, I'll put another motion on the floor as far as deferring any late charges to the other utilities until September or something, but I'll make that motion if I can afterwards, please.
Councillor Thompson's motion on the floor. You ready for the question? This is to not increase water and wastewater by 3.5%. Electrical is already at 0. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Zelinski, did you want to further discuss this issue of utilities?
Yeah, I'd like to put a motion on the floor, see if I get a seconder, that council direct staff to, I'm going to say cancel any late penalties on city-controlled utilities until September 1st. Throwing out there for more discussion than anything.
I'll second that.
So,
Okay, motion on the floor and open to discussion.
through your worship,
Yes.
if I may, just some conversation with Juliet and just some clarification for Councillor Zelinski. Is that upon request and upon just receiving either some verbal or even an email kind of indicating this is a result of COVID or carte blanche? And my understanding is during the flooding, the resolution was people could call in and get that, but it wasn't a carte blanche across the board. So just some clarification.
Yeah, and for me, it's so we're not saying that you're not supposed to pay for your water, or you're not supposed to pay for your electricity. Yes. All I'm saying is any late fees for you not paying it be eliminated for everybody, for the utilities we're in control of. So we're not losing the money on the commodity itself. We're just not charging a over and above late fee charge, because cash flow is going to be a problem for everybody. So that's what I'm saying, is it's not income that we're budgeted for.
Yeah.
But it's just something that we're trying to help out the citizens where we can, and we understand that cash flow is going to be an issue, so no late fees till after September of 2020 is my suggestion.
If I may, and kind of as a friendly amendment, have the resolution from now until August 31st, because then you've got a deadline, as it were. So that would be my only recommendation.
Sure, works for me.
All right. Do we have enough direction here in this?
Yes, through your worship. Just, I want to be sure, if approved, this is for anybody, so we're not going to require anybody to provide any additional information or make a request. If there is a late payment, it'll just automatically be waived, essentially.
Well, the late fee.
Late fee, sorry, yes.
That's the intention of my motion, yes.
Okay.
And I support that because of the flood did not impact everybody in the community, but COVID-19 and the loss of employment and a number of other things does affect the community as a whole.
Okay.
So we're not waiving people paying those fees, but we're waiving the late charges to that. That's really clear.
Until the end of August.
Till the end of August, okay. That's the motion on the floor. Further discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Council. Moving back to the agenda.
Could we please have a little bit of a recess?
So council, it's good with us to have a little break. There's only 4 items left, and they're all fourth reading of bylaws. So, and then question period from the public. But in theory, if council feels like fourth reading is already all the scrutiny has been given, this could be pretty quick. Anyways, just a thought. And then we could break for a bit and go into an in-camera meeting like in an hour or 45 minutes later.
We could take some break there that would be longer term. Council, in those fourth readings, do we see a lot of contentious issues in that? Can I ask you, are you seeing difficulties with fourth reading?
No, I'm ready to give it myself the whole reading.
Okay, let's go back and move down through those items and get them off the table. So, recommendation number 1, the electrical regulations. These are fourth readings, and this is a repeal. Councillor Zielinski makes the motion.
Yeah, for both those, the new bylaw and the repeal.
Okay.
I'll second.
Councillor Krog seconds. All those in favor?
Yep.
Carried. Moving to the next one. Give me my agenda back. I'll fix this while we're in our break. Wastewater. Okay, we also have a repeal. And can I have that motion for?
So moved for both that and the repeal.
Seconded by Councillor. No discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
And down to the next. Water regulation bylaw and repeal bylaw. Councillor Corlick makes the motion. Councillor Krog seconds it.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Carried. And the final one, the council gives final reading to the utility billing bylaw number 2864. That motion? And now Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Corlick. All those in favor?
Aye.
Carried. All right, so that places us down in the section where we ask if there's any further...
Mr. Mayor, one more quick thing. The CAO had a quick request here regarding the wellness committee, I believe it is.
And whether council wanted to appoint an individual and an alternate to the wellness committee with Boundary Family.
Right, okay. I certainly would recommend a continuum of Councillor Moslin and Thompson as a second to that, since they're already in the know with a lot of information that's passing and moving on. Does council feel comfortable with that?
I'd like to say a couple things. Is I understand why Duncan brought this forward, but unfortunately we haven't done this to any of the committees that people are sitting on or whatever.
Yeah.
So I would rather just see let's deal with all the committees, get the people appointed as appropriate, and move on from there. This one of doesn't sit right with me. But
Well, what doesn't sit right, that we're making this a motion? I'm not asking for it as a motion. I'm saying that we have in the past simply discussed who is appropriate for what committee and decided that on our own as a group without motions.
yeah, and that's what I'm thinking Duncan is asking for, is to formally approve anybody sitting as a liaison on any committee, and that's what I'm reading there. I must be wrong otherwise.
Duncan, can you clarify that? Do you want this, do you see advantages in making this a motion to send a representative and an alternate to this group?
Yeah, so through your worship, I mean, whatever council is comfortable with. Councillor Zielinski is right in that really a policy and delegating is always the cleanest process, but whatever you're comfortable with. Right now, as long as everybody's in agreement, you can move it forward, whatever works.
Okay, I would ask Councillor Motlin whether he's in agreement, first of all, since we're putting him on the line here. Would you be willing to sit on the wellness committee?
Certainly, Your Worship, I would be glad to. Just on one point, I believe that there were a couple motions where I think I got appointed to the Rec Commission by a motion.
Those were necessary in terms of municipal rules.
Yes, and I think I also got appointed to the Discover Grand Forks Committee by a motion. But that's all well aside, Mayor. What I see as a bigger problem here is the deployment of council. And I really think we need to maybe start to consider that going forward, that if we end up with a whole bunch more work, but like right now, are you satisfied, Mayor, that the major tasks before council are being handled? I know Councillor Korolek has also been appointed through motion, our RDKB representative. I guess I'm asking you, Mayor, are you comfortable with the ability of council to handle the needs of the community in our current deployment?
In answer to that, no. I think things have changed substantially. The post-COVID situation right now is not the same as it was. I was happy to see council moving into a number of key roles within the community, but right now we need all the manpower we can muster from council, and I would certainly encourage councillors to get involved in other aspects of the post-COVID kind of situation we're facing. So I think we do need more work by councillors here to possibly take some of the work off staff at times.
Okay, well, thank you, Your Worship. If council's is happy with appointing Councillor Thompson and myself, perhaps she and I can talk about who would be the first and who would be the alternate, and maybe be able to start resources with that kind of cooperation as well. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Studley has his hand up.
Yeah, if it helps with Christine, I don't mind doing any of the chamber TBA stuff. That helps take a little bit off your plate.
I appreciate that, Zach. But they don't meet that often. But if you're downtown now, but if you would like to take that on, that would be, I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
With Mayor's concurrence.
Are you okay with working with Councillor Moslin then to determine who would sit at the table from time to time at this
Absolutely.
On this group?
Absolutely.
Okay, Council, you're comfortable with that? Anyone feel we need to vote on it? No? All right. So Duncan, it looks like we have our two representatives. I'm assuming at this point that we are being invited to participate, or am I wrong here?
Nope, you're correct. I talked to Darren, and he thought it would be a great idea to have a city rep on there. And then when requests come forward or anything that could potentially come forward, that individual will have some information around it. We talked about a councillor representative, thought that was a good idea. So we'll let him know that who our representatives are as soon as I know. So just let me know.
So that's your other side.
Interfering noise there. All right, thank you very much. We have questions from the public or media. Do we have any questions from the gallery?
Yes, you do.
Mr. Johnson, would you like to?
Okay, first off for me, congratulations to Councillor Studley for opening his new store downtown. I hope that's a success for you. Okay, so I'm going to segue into Yondahan has a question, and I'll just kind of intro my little comment, which will lead into his, and it's about the homeless. So we know a large fraction of the homeless people here are people who grew up here. People tend to come home when their world falls apart. With the economic crunch due to COVID-19, many more people are in danger of losing their jobs and businesses. Probably more so in the States than here, but still. And some of those may be people who came from here and went out into the world to seek a life. And that worked for quite a while, and then along came COVID, and their world fell apart. And they have no home anymore. So they come home back to Grand Forks. The ranks of the homeless will grow, and the ranks of the homeless here might also swell. These would be people who didn't fall through the cracks because of substance abuse or mental health concerns. They might even have vehicles to live in and families with them, but they'd be homeless and jobless and here. I just suggest that whoever is talking about dealing with issues to do with the homeless recognize that next year there will be more people here who we could call homeless for reasons I just laid out. Now, this is John DeHaan's question, and he's reframed it. Regardless of what decision is made with regard to the DFSS proposal, the imminent danger of wildfire originating at the Moto site will remain as long as the camp is allowed to continue. Currently, the property is zoned RR1, and the camp obviously does not fit the zoning. Considering that the activity on the property is illegal with regard to present zoning, will the city accept liability for property damage to neighbors in the event of wildfire originating on the property? Regardless of the decision, what measures is the city prepared to take to mitigate fire danger? And before you answer, I'm just going to point out a news item from this morning. In Florida, at an airport, there was a grass fire. And by the time they were able to get it under control, it had literally burned 2,500 rental cars that were parked in that area. Like grass fires, as people who fight fires know, they just take off. So anyways, that's Jan's question for you.
Okay, you know, I don't know at this point. We've asked for a staff report and more information and to look at the issue of liability and for a use permit. I'm not sure that we can ask George at this point through our CAO whether or not we've given some thought to fire. That would seem to be the concern of Mr. DeHaan would be.
George had to leave the building to do his job as a fire marshal. So.
Yes, so through your worship, as part of council's direction at this meeting, that was a concern raised by council and our ability to relocate individuals up in that area. Now, my understanding is Darren, as part of his outreach program, is going to be providing some safer means for cooking, etc. However, I don't believe we have the ability to remove individuals at this time based on the fact that we don't have a place for them to go. But that is definitely a question that council has asked me to find out, and that will be included in that report.
All right, thank you very much, Duncan. And I think that answers Mr. DeHaan's question, Mr. Johnson. Is that...
it's up to him as to whether that's a valid answer or not. I would just also point out, since you weren't here last year, the organization that's putting in the soup kitchen back here, they originally came to the city with a proposal which was rejected. They had bought a mobile kitchen that they wanted to set up in a location. I don't know whether they still have it or not, but if they did have something like that, it might be something that could be used up in Moto. I don't know if it needs services or anything like that, just so you know.
Can I say something?
Sure, go ahead. I'm sorry, I'm not running the meeting.
Oh, sorry. No, the kitchen that they have is not mobile.
Okay.
Everybody keeps saying it is. It's a brick and mortar. It's a building. It has to be plumbed in.
Okay.
Neil is right. The hookups to that are quite extensive. It's not mobile, and it is. They still do own it, though. I think it's still parked.
Okay. Just check to see where you're on. Has a reply here. Follow up. He says, I appreciate the answer. Thank you for my concerns. Primarily with fire, what mitigation efforts is the city prepared to take? That's his follow-up.
Okay, well, and again, I think this is something that our staff are looking at in terms of the liability issue there.
Okay.
The availability of getting up there with fire trucks, all of those things.
I have one last question. Councillor Mosley, where is the pit count sit?
Councillor Moslin, the pit count.
Yes, unfortunately, Mayor, as the community knows, that thought most of them knew, the pit count was canceled. The subcommittee met. Well, on March 11th, there was the training session, which, as council knows, was fairly successful. And then on March the 12th, as the more provincial restrictions came in, the subcommittee recommended that the pit count be canceled or postponed. And they were recommending that to the Social Services Advisory Group, which was slated to meet on March the 16th, I believe it was the 16th. Anyhow, but by that time, that committee also canceled its meeting. So the pit count was postponed indefinitely, as were most of the pit counts that were scheduled to happen within the province. So the organizers of the provincial pit counts canceled those counts throughout the province. It's regrettable because a lot of work had gone in by volunteers to make that count happen. We did learn a lot from the count. From that, I've personally made some really good contacts with other staff around the province who were about to embark on pit counts, as well as provincial staff people. So I think we're in a good position perhaps to do a pit count if it's called upon us for some time in the future, perhaps in the fall or next spring. We'll try another point in time count. Okay, so thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, any further questions?
Nope, that's it for me. Thank you. I don't see any others on the internet, so.
3 o'clock.
Okay, I'd like to thank council for work to make this work. It's been quite the challenge, and thank our staff for the technical setups. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Councillor Mazen, Councillor Corlett, Councillor Thompson. Meeting adjourned.